Welcome back to the MMA Report here on TSN Radio up in Canada. And this coming Friday, Bellator is going to be back on Spike TV with a card from San Jose State University. It kicks off at 9 p.m. Eastern Time. It will be headlined by lightweights Josh "The Punk" Thompson and Pablo Villaseca. And joining us on the line right now to chat a bit about this card is the president of Bellator. He is Scott Coker. Scott, how are you?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Doing fantastic. Looking forward to the card this Friday. And I think another man looking very much forward to what is ahead for him in Bellator is Josh Thompson. This is already the second time we have seen him in a Bellator cage. And I think it's safe to say, Scott, I mean, you go way back with Josh Thompson, that I think coming to Bellator has given this guy a whole new perspective on how long he wants to take his fighting career. Seems very rejuvenated coming out of the Mike Bronzoulis fight and with such a quick turnaround here fighting in San Jose.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, Josh, we love Josh. He's a guy that we spent, many years here fighting in San Jose, and he was kind of like the homegrown kid that, did really well. And he had those epic battles with Gilbert Melendez in that trilogy. Josh is a kid that on any given night could beat anybody or, could lose. So, this is something that has to be another test to see what he's got left in the gas tank. But believe me, anytime he fights, it's going to be exciting because I've never seen that kid in a boring fight.
No, doesn't have too shabby a track record when it comes to that regard. As somebody so entrenched in the Bay Area and the fight scene, how would you contrast, the peak of Strikeforce and the way it rose up into a national entity, just moving outside of the Bay Area, compared to today? Where is the appetite for the fight consumer, as you would best describe it in San Jose?
Well, when we started Strikeforce, MMA had, we did the first fight that was legal in the state of California, and but there wasn't any MMA really across the country. I mean, UFC was doing their thing. I think they had a small Fox deal on like regional outlets, but there wasn't really any major television covering it the way that it gets covered today. So it was a much different time. But I think the one thing that when I think about that era was, we basically had 3 or 4 fighters under contract when we were first starting the MMA business, one being Frank Shamrock, Kung Lee, Josh Thompson, and Gilbert Melendez. I mean, they were the 4 building blocks of Strikeforce, and then, along the way we picked up guys like Daniel Cormier and Luke Rockhold and Tyron Woodley and OSP, and then came Gina Carano, and then came Ronda Rousey, and then came Nick Diaz and, Robbie Lawler. I mean, the list goes on and on and on of the guys that, were fighting here at that time. And, what I feel about that era was it was just a very special moment in time. And I do feel and would say that there's a lot of similarities between that era and this era. It's like, it took 2 to 3, maybe 4 years to get those guys to the point where they're starting to become very popular, fighting on Showtime, fighting on CBS. And, the formula still applies today because, even before 2006, the first MMA was legal in California, I was doing fights starting in 85. So we always were really good at start identifying, start building, making fighters relevant. And this is more in the kickboxing business, but we've applied that same formula here. And I think that, we're doing the same thing today in Bellator. And then you'll see guys that, have been around for a while. And you're gonna need those veterans, but we're looking for the new guys, signing the next guy, and then we'll round off the fighter roster with some free agents that might be coming out soon, and then we'll see how the roster looks at in the middle of next year. I think it's going to be very healthy.
Another fight we have on Friday will feature Patricky Pitbull Freite in a rematch with Derek Anderson. Anderson won their first fight 2 years ago. And I think at the end of 2015, Scott, when you sit down over the holiday season and you can look back at the advances Bellator has made, I think the lightweight division is one that you can really hang your hat on. I mean, from Will Brooks on down, you look at 2 winners coming out of this Friday, but then you add in the Michael Chandler, obviously, Brandon Gertz looking tremendous a number of weeks back, Sahad Awad always a couple of wins away. This seems to be a division that it kind of is the division to me that has stood out the most during your tenure here in Bellator that a lot of guys have stepped up, and we have a lot of interesting fights potentially on the menu for 2016.
Yeah, and, don't be surprised if you see a couple more tournaments here and there. But, when I think about the weight divisions in Bellator and where I feel like we have a really good, strong base and something really good to build on, one is, like you said, the lightweight division, but also look at our featherweight division. I mean, I think our featherweight division, can compare it to any league. And then look at our 205 pound weight class. I mean, it's strong. And then I even look at our 170 with the guys coming up, with Brendan Ward coming up, with Breshkov already the champion. We have MVP in that weight class, and we got some really studs in that 170 pound weight class. So if you think about those four divisions, those are divisions I really look forward to in 2016.
You mentioned the idea of free agents, and certainly there is one very interesting name out there in Benson Henderson. And I know you're not going to crunch numbers for us or anything, but I mean, you look at every name that comes available. Benson Henderson, there is a long list of positives to him in any kind of an organization. Is it safe to say there is interest in a Benson Henderson should that present itself?
Yeah, I mean, if Henderson is a free agent, we definitely would like to talk to him. As we would, a lot of the free agents or if a fighter becomes free. So, to me, yes, definitely. And, he had a great win over the weekend. And, when he's a free agent, I'm sure my guys will be reaching out and talking to him.
I just want to throw a few subjects at you. One is a division you didn't mention, and that was at heavyweight. What is the latest involving Vitaly Minakov, and is there a cutoff date where the idea of stripping the title is going to have to be at least entertained at this point?
Yeah, I mean, it's already been entertained, but this is something I really feel like we can work it out.
Uh-huh.
And, that was kind of like one of the, the remaining, contract items from, let's say the old regime. And, I think that, we're going to be meeting with his people and meeting with some of the, the business partners in Russia there. I think that's going to happen in the next 30 to 60 days. And I'm sure we can work it out. I just think we just have to get into a room and everybody just get on the same page because, look, we're not opposed to Minakov fighting in Russia for other promoters. We just, expect him to honor his obligations here.
Also on Friday night, immediately after the card, there's going to be a special on the return of Fedor. Is there any chance we could get an announcement on Friday night, Scott, as we are counting down to New Year's Eve here? No opponent has been made public yet. I feel Scott Coker has the inside track on what's happening on New Year's Eve. Is there any way that might be revealed on Friday night prior to this special?
You know what? That's really a question for Saki Ibarra. We've been waiting for his decision on who he'll be pulling the trigger to fight Fedor. So, we get an answer by this Friday. I think that'd be fantastic. But, that's really not a Bellator decision, which, I think everybody knows. It's really Saki Ibarra's and Rizin's call. And, like I said, hopefully they'll have something to announce, and we can tie it into our broadcast. But we're still waiting, just like everybody else.
A few questions. Of course, a lot of people are looking ahead at February the 19th. In terms of the two key fights that have been announced, Kimbo Slice, Dada 5000, and Ken Shamrock, Hoist Gracie, which will happen, Scott, almost 10 years to the day of Gracie Shamrock in San Jose. Other members of the family, but nonetheless, certainly a thread here with Scott Coker. Either of these fights, were they relatively lengthy negotiations, or were all four largely on board when these fights were proposed? I'm very curious about how these deals came about.
You know what? I tell you, you can never go wrong with the Shamrock versus Gracie fight.
It always works every generation, Scott.
I mean, yeah. And you know what? Let me say, those two brands really are the icon and the pioneers that built the sport. And it all started really when I reached out to Ken, and I said, hey, Ken, why don't you come down to the Fan Fest and sign autographs and meet the fans, and I think it's going to be a big deal. We want you to be a part of it. This was before the Tito Ortiz versus Bonner fight in San Diego. And he came down, and he walks into the room, and I go, hey, nice to see you again. I hadn't seen Ken in probably 10 years. And I said, hey, Ken, nice to see you again. Hope all's well. And, we're just chatting away. And then he's like, I want to fight that guy. And he's pointing across the room, and I'm like, who do you want to fight? Like, you still want to fight? And so I was a little surprised, but the guy looked in great shape, and he still had that little mean streak in him that he has. And he said, that guy, and I said, who? Randy? He said, no, I want to fight Royce Gracie. And I look across and there's Royce. And so I just kind of put that in my back pocket, which led me to ask Ken, hey, would you be interested in fighting Kimbo Slice? Which he accepted, and then you know what happened in that fight.
Right.
But after the fight was over, they approached me again. Ken and Des approached me and said, hey, we want to fight Royce Gracie. That's the fight that we really want. And Ken's always wanted to fight him. It's been eating at him for the last, 20 years. Mm-hmm. And would love to do it. And so I said, Royce, I'm going to give you a hypothetical. Would you fight Ken Shamrock? And he said, I'll fight him right now. Like, let's do it right now. Like, let's move the tables. Let's do it right now. And I said, no, not. If you like, he just want to fight you right now in the ballroom. Would you be interested in fighting him? In an MMA match? He said, yeah, I'll do it. And so anyway, I just kind of left it, and then the fight kind of went away. And right about, I want to say, a couple of weeks before he announced it, we brought it up again internally. We thought, man, this might be a fun fight to do, and why don't we reach out? We reached out to Ken. He said yes. Called Royce. He said, let's do it. And then within 24 hours, the fight was made.
And you guys were able to keep it a secret, like right up until the announcement. I mean, it's not too often you get to make an announcement, Scott, and the majority of the world was very surprised when Royce walked out there. And I did like the touch of Kurt Angle there, the slight tease. But a feather in your cap to be able to keep that one quiet for as long as you guys did.
Yeah, and I'll have to get up to the fighters, too, in their corners and their camps, because, those sort of things tend to leak out. But
yeah.
They're very professional, and everybody kept it internal. And I think that the whole Kurt Angle, being involved on the Fan Fest and having him there that night kind of took away from, any speculation, because people thought that it was going to be Kurt Angle that was going to fight Ken. But all along it was Royce, and, that's just the way it worked out.
You and I both know, Scott, that February 19th, very likely chance this will set a new Bellator television record. I don't think there is any debate that this is going to be a massive audience that tunes in. What has been the reaction to these two fights? Because typically when there's fights like this announced, there are people that just necessarily, they complain. I have not heard a lot of that in regards to either of these fights. I think there's a genuine curiosity and anticipation for these fights. What has your reaction been from people in terms of since the announcement has been made ahead of February 19th?
Yeah, you know what? I mean, here's the thing, that you're always going to get some of the heat. There's always some guys on the internet that are, keyboard warriors that are the hardcore fans that, kind of take some shots at us. But I would say 80% of the dialogue has been really positive, and people are excited. And to me, this is where we have to think about Spike TV, and it's an entertainment property, and we're looking for something like you said that a fight that's going to bring in a massive number. And then we put some other fights on there. Like, we haven't announced the whole fight card, but you're going to see some, just like when Kimbo fights Ken. You saw Pitbull fighting Weichel on the undercard. I mean, it's like we put in some hardcore fights that the hardcore fight fans want to see. And then we're going to do some fun fights that we think that the average consumer that maybe has left MMA that might come back, for a night and watch, a full night of fight cards, with like the fun fights, some of the hardcore fights. But I would say that really that's really our goal, is let's cast a bigger net, and let's bring some of those fans back to mixed martial arts, and let's help keep this this sport growing.
Two final things, Scott. Appreciate the time as always. I mentioned Kurt Angle there. What can you tell us the nature of this deal? Is it limited at this point to simply broadcasting, and the door is open on Kurt's side of what he decides to do? And is he done with professional wrestling? What can you say about the relationship with Kurt Angle and how it's going to progress next year?
The one thing I didn't speak to Kurt about is his pro wrestling, future, what he wants to do. But, I said, look, we're here. We'd like to have you involved in some more fan fest. People loved him. It was just a great fit to sit there with our other guys and just kind of, touch the fan, touch the Bellator fan that came to the fan fest. And, but I said, we're here, Kurt. If you, want me to take that next step, we are here. And he said, hey, look, the door's open, and, he'll get back to us. So that's where we left it.
And final thing, should you be willing to come back on our show, and we're talking a year from now, Scott, because you enjoy coming on our show so much, what would you like to be talking about a year from now in terms of steps further that Bellator has made, challenges in front of you for 2016 the Bellator still needs to address? What is on the agenda from a big picture perspective for the new year?
Well, I tell you, we have a lot of boxes to check, and one is really proud to announce our international expansion, which I was just in Paris over the weekend. We had a press conference there announcing our first fight with the European media, and that's going to be in Torino, Italy on April 16th. And that's going to be the first Bellator fight in the cage, outside of North America, let's say. And then we want to continue, doing fights in Europe, in the UK, and the Middle East. We're going to have a fight planned in the fall of 16 in Tel Aviv, which is going to be amazing. I think it's going to be historical. I've been out there a couple of times already to scout out, the locations and met with the TV producers and the TV station. And one thing people have to remember, Bellator is aired in 140 countries around the world.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're in RTL France, which is terrestrial television, airing in the whole country on RTL 9 in France. And we have a deal with DMAX in Italy, and then we have Ego Total in Israel. We're on Spike UK in the UK, which Viacom owns, and also the Spike. The UK fight, which we'll announce later, will also have Channel 5, which is like CBS here. It's mainstream television distribution across the whole country. So we're getting tremendous distribution, building a tremendous fan base throughout the world. And to me, this last year has been some really good building blocks. We've done some big fights, some great fights, some fun fights, some hardcore fights. But something that, look, if you looked at Bellator, 14 months ago, it was, to me, it was a TV property, and they were doing small shows in casinos, and we're going to continue that. But let's take it to the next level. These tentpole events that we created are going to be in major stadiums across the world, and we're going to do some big fights domestically, big fights internationally, and we're going to, grow Bellator into a international property.
And are you going to Japan for the New Year's Eve card?
Oh, of course. I wouldn't miss it.
Wow. So there you go. You get to see Bob Sapp Akebono up close and personal. I'm envious.
I got a funny story about the first one. Is we were trying to get Mike Tyson to fight in K1, and Mike Tyson was supposed to fight Bob Sapp that night, but we couldn't get Mike into the country. That was one of the issues. And then we couldn't come to a deal for Mike for the rules. So what we did was we hired Mike, and Fuji TV, K1 arranged for Fuji TV to rent out Aloha Stadium. We all flew to Hawaii. Mike's girlfriend at the time, some of his friends, and then all the K1 guys. We were all there, and we were in Aloha Stadium with honestly 10 people, all the lights on. They broadcast Akebono versus Sapp on the big screen, and Mike Tyson and a Japanese host were the commentators for that show, going live back to Japan, but they were actually sitting at Aloha Stadium in Honolulu.
Wow. I've never heard that story before.
Yeah, I got all kinds of stories.
Wow. What do you think? Whether it be in the U.S. or in Japan, Bob Sapp versus Mike Tyson, had that happened in 2003, the Akebono match was gigantic. 54 million people watching that fight.
Oh, my God.
How big would that have been, Scott? That time?
So hard. Yeah, we tried so hard, man. I feel like that was the fun that got away. And, Mike had, still boxing on his mind. He's going through a lot of, problems at that time. Now he's got, his business, seems like he has his business together, and he's got a family, and he's grounded. But at that time, he was still a little bit of a run and rebel, right? Yeah. And, and so we tried so hard. But that fight in America, that fight in Japan, that fight in China, that fight anywhere in the world. But, K1, which, I was working with them at the time, and we were running their North American operations for them. We spent 9 months with Mike trying to get him to do this deal. And it just didn't work out at the end, but it was a great experience for me. And And, I got to hang out with Mike Tyson for 9 months. It wasn't a bad gig.
One final question on that. I keep saying final question. When Bob Sapp went on The Tonight Show with Jay Leno, was it felt that the deal was just about done, that it was ready at that point, or was that almost throwing the ball into Mike's court to kind of put the pressure on?
No, I mean, we were right there, ready to do the deal. And then, some of, I would say Mike's friends would get involved, and it just became very complicated. But, to make a fight at that time with Mike was really, really a web of people that were involved that we just couldn't overcome at the time.
Wow. Scott, you've got to write a book one of these days when it's all said and done. I think you could make a number of volumes, I think, just the history of fighting.
Yeah, you know what? I mean, I've been around since PKA back in the 80s when there was no MMA. No one even heard of jiu-jitsu. It was on ESPN, above-the-waist kickboxing. You had to wear full-length pants down to your ankles. You had to throw 8 kicks per round. And, I did my first fight with ESPN in 85. So I've been a long time and, seen a lot of growth in a sport, which I love. I mean, I love martial arts. This is why I do it. And I'm going to continue doing my part and help growing the sport.
Well, here he is, 30 years later, and Bellator 147 is coming up this Friday night, once again, 9 p.m. Eastern on Spike TV. As we mentioned, headlined by Pablo Villaseca and Josh Thompson. Also see featherweights Daniel Weichel and Georgi Karahanyan. And we mentioned Patricky Pitbull Freite taking on Derek Anderson. 5-fight main card. And who knows? Bellator always has some news for us whenever you tune into one of their broadcasts. So I know he's keeping his cards close to the vest, but we will be watching with interest on Friday night. Scott, thank you as always. Always love chatting with you. And if we don't speak with you before the end of the year, have a tremendous holiday season and trip to Japan.
Well, thank you. And listen, when I'm in Japan, I'm happy to call you and give you some updates.
Oh, well, we might have to coordinate then. We could have our live correspondent, Scott Coker, from Tokyo, reporting live on the Rizin Fighting Federation beat. You can play media member, Scott. We'll do it.
Let me know.
I would love to chat with you. Well, thanks again, and we'll be watching on Friday. Thank you as always.